ACF statistics reflect that 37 murders were committed in the first week of 2022 across the island, and it seems to be only getting worse. We see an average of 5 killings being committed per day since the start of the year. So what's being done to hopefully curb the crime wave? Dr. Jason Mackay, security consultant and owner of Mackay Security Armored, is with us now, not for the first time. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. It's morning time.
Morning. Thanks so much for having me.
It is our pleasure, sir. I hope all is well with you.
Great.
Even though it seems like it's horrible, and it is, we've been getting these numbers for a number of years.
You're so correct.
So what's been the problem? As I said, double-barrel. What's been the problem and how you solve it? Well, before you reach how you solve it, what do you think is the problem here?
Well, as I said, we've been this way for many, many years. We have a ridiculous number of gangs out there. They're extremely well funded from persons living abroad and from extortion rackets. And we changed a lot of things in how we fought crime in the last 27 years, so that it's not the way it used to be. It's because there is more emphasis on moving into international standards of human rights. So our legal system doesn't allow for the type of detention that we normally had. And we had the whole thing with the persons funding it from abroad, and for the system now being changed where detention became much harder to do, has resulted in a legal system that no longer really gives you extremely long sentences for gun offenses. And all of these factors put together has given you a situation that is untenable. And at this point, 11,000 police officers with assistance from some soldiers simply can't fight it anymore.
Jason,
we go to a saturation strategy, because it's not like back in the 90s where you arrest somebody and put them in jail for a gun and you remand them for 2 years leading up to the trial, and then after that they get 10 and 12-year sentences. No, they're gonna get bail within a few days, literally. And the trial may be relatively quick, but if it happens now and they plead guilty, they're in and out of there, and a few $100,000 fine paid or 6 months in jail, and they're back. So there is no real fear of long-term detention or long sentences, and the result is you now have to go with a saturation strategy that complements that, because you have to go into crime prevention now rather than punishing crime, and you just don't have the numbers for a saturation strategy. That's really what it comes down to. People are going back and forth on this figure. We need 18,000, we have 11,000. It's as simple as that.
So let me ask you to delve a little bit into that phenomenon about the overseas funding, right? Because a lot of us look on and think the criminal gangs locally, so it's a local phenomenon, but you're saying this thing is headquartered abroad.
Yeah, the majority of gangs are being funded by persons living abroad who are in criminal activities abroad, which makes it very difficult for us out here to get hold of them over there. There is, of course, the larger gangs, the Klansmen, the One Order, so on, which are being funded by an extortion racket that's operating in their commercial sector. And that is the case in 2 major gangs in downtown Kingston as well. But the large majority of the gangs are being funded by some guy from the community who went abroad, has managed to get into the narcotics business, is doing well, and really for very little motivation is causing a lot of the conflicts that are taking place in these areas.
Yeah, but Jason, for me to go abroad, send back money, send gun and stuff, it can't be me alone doing all of this. Somebody in some high position must be allowing these things to come in. Somebody.
Nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Nothing like that. We receive more personal effects than the entire United States of America. So our wharves are overrun with goods coming in. You can get guns in if you want to. We also have the Haitian situation with guns coming down. It doesn't take a government to be involved in this, or a very, very wealthy man. Some man who has left this community and is gotten into narcotics and has some disposable income and can buy guns abroad, which is not that difficult. He can send them down in a barrel, and he can send them down in parts. I mean, there's so many ways you can get.
So our ports then obviously our, I don't know which word I want, but our ports are not what it's supposed to be. Then if
There's
things
no
can do,
port system in the world that can search every single personal effect system, and especially ours, because we receive more personal effects than everybody.
so why we
And
can't,
there's no
so why we
way
can't
you can
search it?
search everyone.
Why we can't do it?
It simply can't be done. It's not logistically possible. There's certain things that are just not logistically possible. You can't search everybody, for example, exiting the stadium after a champs final. It's just not logistically possible. There's the same thing. It's not logistically possible to search every item of personal effects coming into the country.
So you find a big man or a man who leaves and becomes big, targets the at-risk and the vulnerable youth in a community who want a food, right? Because your article says it really is, gangs can't exist without a source of income. It's that simple. It's really bread and butter, right? This is your job.
And it's not the community getting the money, you know. It's really a bunch of very, very stupid young men who are getting funding from, you know, from the person, getting the guns from the persons overseas and waging a war with people who normally live zinc fences apart.
But these are usually, the
close.
recruits are from the community is what I'm saying. I'm not saying the community is getting the money by any means. I'm saying usually if they leave, they recruit vulnerable at-risk youth within the community from which they leave. Oftentimes, I think that's part of the phenomenon. But you speak of crime prevention, and I'm curious to know what...
Just to stick a pin, what they are recruiting is criminals. Well, I think we tend to try and turn them into victims and we call them at-risk youth. The majority of young men 18 to 35 in any settlement are not criminals, and they're all poor. The reality is the ones who do get drafted in are criminals. And that is the problem. There is a very small segment of any inner city community, but it's large enough to wreak havoc because there's almost no control mechanism to stop them from going meters away from them and committing a crime. Because we don't have saturation. But they're not at-risk youth, they're criminals.
I'm not certain if everyone would agree with you there, but if
I'm sure they won't.
If you say,
I mean, opportunity comes in different forms. If it's a good opportunity, well, you know, I guess we can go down that rabbit hole, but let's not, because we don't have the time to do it this morning. But I want to ask you what the crime prevention. I mean, obviously we're down another rabbit hole now because we're out of control. But what would you do to fix it? How do we get to a place where it's a mitigation strategy as opposed to a Band-Aid now that we're trying to kind of put on this big...
As I said, because we're into a system of low consequences and mild consequences for gun offenses, we have to complement that with a saturation strategy. We don't have the numbers in the JCF and JDF at this time to do that. We have to create a real JCF auxiliary.
And what is a saturation strategy?
Where you put police in the hotspot communities in numbers, so that the control no longer rests with the criminal elements in the in the community. It rests with the police. But occupation is extremely difficult. You have to have numbers to do that, and our recommended numbers are 18,000, and we only have 11,000. So any security entity, police, private or otherwise, that is operating at 40% below capacity is going to have problems, particularly if it needs a saturation strategy.
Is there anywhere in the world that you know that they have crime under control?
Scandinavian countries at this point pretty much have crime under control, but they don't have poverty at anywhere near the degree we have. And in many cases, they don't have, and when actually one or two cases, it's almost no poverty at all. So poverty at the baseline of it is a problem. And then culture, you know, there have been cultural changes over many, many decades. You know? So
final question, I need a quick answer. How do you get the 7,000 in the police force?
You create a JCF auxiliary, a real JCF auxiliary.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
You recruit from the licensed firearm holders.
What do you mean by that, an auxiliary? What do you mean by that?
Well, JDF has an auxiliary, as you would know, a reserve, for want of a better word.
Okay.
You create a reserve that can get you, for example, out there with a rifle around your back at least one night a week, along with other licensed firearm holders. You create a reserve. NYPD has a reserve. We had a reserve. We used to have the special constabulary. We still have the rural police force, but it is now a full-time job. It's not, so it's not really a functional reserve. What we need is a functional reserve, which
But-
mirrors the JDF reserve.
But they would have to be trained on everything, right? You don't just say,
Well, licensed firearm holders are already trained, but of course you'd have to be trained in policing. But
Okay.
that's doable, very doable.
all right. Good to see you. Stay safe and God bless you and your family.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Security consultant and owner of Mackay Security Armored, Dr. Jason Mackay. Whew. We cooled things down on the other side of the break. In some countries, I think I said this last week, in some countries, there's compulsory army service for like 2 years. You have to go in the army when you reach 18. And then if you decide to stay, then fine. I don't know if that's doable.
Oh, boy.
I don't know if that's doable, but we need something. Soon come.